Hello everyone, and welcome to a new conversation of the Altering, Shifting Communing series, which is a project presented and hosted by a Call for Curators. I'm Ilaria Conti, the curator of the series. And for those who are tuning in for the very first time, I just want to briefly say what SHIFT COMM is. And that is an ongoing conversation series on curatorial practices that cultivate communal, decolonial approaches, and also that we think critically and ethically their role. So we gather every other Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Berlin time for a conversation with practitioners from diverse contexts, to discuss practices that are rooted in process, in research, and also that foster ethical forms of relationality. So today I give my warmest welcome to Youssef, Anastas, and Yazan Khalili, two of the founders of Radio Alhara. Thanks so very much to both of you for being here. I was very much looking forward to this conversation. And I know that after we made it public, some people might have been wondering, but why a radio and what does it have to do with anything? And I just want to say before we get started that the ways in which you have been developing your project can offer really insightful and interesting ways of thinking about notions of taking care of curating or working with community and so on. So thank you so much in advance again for accepting this invitation. I just want to remind everybody the structure of this event. So we will have a conversation for the next 40 minutes approximately. And in the meantime, as always, I encourage those who are watching to ask questions through the comment section on Facebook and YouTube, and also share thoughts or question even while we're talking to our email address. And I'm just going to show it right here for a moment. So let's get right to it, I would say. Youssef, Yazan, I tend to not introduce our guests because I don't like to speak for others. So I just want to ask you if you could introduce yourself. And I just also take the opportunity to put in the first question, which is always the same for this series since we started from day one. And it is one that I keep on asking because I think it's still valid, and it is so because it acknowledges somewhat our humanness, which is, how are you? Where are you? And how have this past months been?
Boom.
Here we are.
I can tell you I lost my second bike in 1 week. Both times I forgot the keys in the bike, and they got stolen. Well, taken. I can't say they were stolen. So yeah. So I'm in that set of mind. I'm forgetting everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm in Paris now since 2 weeks because I'm gonna be a dad. So
congratulations.
Yeah. So I'm in that state of mind.
That's major. And Yazan, where are you? Where are they stealing or taking or lending? Like,
yeah, I came 3 months ago actually to Amsterdam. I'm currently at the Rijksacademy, and I'm already a dad for 2 years and 3 months.
So congrats to you as well.
That's also a state of mind.
So then, talking about the project, Radio Alhara somewhat, I guess, also answers my first question, which is, how have this past months been, right? Because it is a project that emerged in March this year during the lockdown. So just starting from the basics, I'd like to ask you if you can tell us a bit what the project is, how it started, and also who's behind it alongside the two of you.
So the radio started in March. Actually, it started very spontaneously. We just saw another radio in Beirut that was launched in Beirut, and that was inspired by another radio launched in Milan called Radio Quartiere, and the one in Beirut was called Radio Alhara. And Radio Alhara was on a website called yamakan.place that puts together a collection of radios from around, at the time it was Radio Alhara from Beirut and Radio Al-Hum from Tunis.
Huma.
Al-Huma from Tunis. And so we said, let's start a radio called Radio Alhara from Palestine. And that was it. That was the start of the radio. The other day, Yazan was showing us the conversation we had on Facebook and how the radio started. And it literally was actually 2 lines, and we started the radio. And now the radio, we're 5, Yazan, Saeed, and Muthanna. They're based in Amman. They're graphic designers. And Lias, my brother, with whom we run our business, and myself.
Yeah. It's it's this small community that began it, but it also like really fast enough began building up the community around it, and many people began contributing and adding material and knowledge and time and effort and everything. We'll tell you about this maybe through the
Absolutely. We want to hear all about it. So I'm going to keep on asking you questions so that you just tell me more and more. Yes. So you just mentioned that the radio was inspired by other neighborhood-based projects, Radio Quartiere, of course, in Milan. For me, being Italian, I'm more familiar with that. But it seems by now also that you have expanded quite a lot past your immediate surroundings, let's put it that way. But what I wanted to ask you is, because again, this is mostly a crowd of artists, visual art practitioners, curators, and so on. So we might not have, definitely I don't have the familiarity, with this kind of other projects. So I wanted to ask you whether you can talk to us or share with us some of these references that were important for you when creating or thinking about this radio. So I'm thinking other radios, just like you mentioned, but also projects, musicians, or else, we will talk more about how multidisciplinary your radio project is, just to get us started. Like, what was on your mind in terms of references or things you were interested or thinking about when you got started?
I think in general, we don't come from media or radio background or press or news. Like we don't come from, not even sound, and we are DJs just like in parties or in with our friends. So it's not like we come from that kind of background. But I think what made it interesting for us, and maybe made the whole project interesting and more experimental, that we're coming from outside of all of these kind of fixed structures of like, this is how you make a radio, this is how you make a sound project, this is what the music scene is, and how that's its mechanisms of working. We came from all of that. And so we came with lots of experimentation and learning through the process. So like we are kind of building the plane while flying it. We come, each one of us come from a different perspective or a different background of like being architects or being designers, being artists, being cultural directors of institutions, making new institutions and projects. So all of that mixture of backgrounds, of experiences, and coming to a new field that we are not experienced in, allowed us to play the way we want without having these restrictions of the medium itself. And so the references for us, I think, are either past experiences or current projects that we're working on, and the things that we're learning while moving. So we kept a close eye on Radio Alhara, for instance, as an experiment, and we really learned a lot from them. Same from other projects that are around the world that we keep getting references from, but never stuck with the medium and its restrictions.
Yeah, and even with the name of the radio, I mean, Radio Alhara in the beginning, maybe it was something related. I don't know. In the beginning, I think Radio Alhara was just the name, and then we're in a lockdown. So the idea was that Radio Alhara was a neighborhood at the scale that was at least much bigger than the scale of a neighborhood. The neighborhood was becoming something quite bigger, but Radio Alhara became also other things. Now Radio Alhara is also, I don't know. I mean, the evolution of the definition of Radio Alhara is what is pinpointed here. I mean, like that. I mean, if I think that if you had asked us what was Radio Alhara in the beginning and what is Radio Alhara now, I think the definition is completely different. And maybe tomorrow it will be again different. All that to say that actually we did not create a radio that's called Radio Alhara with a proper definition of what the radio is and the line we would like to impose on the radio, etc. But it was just a radio that evolved along with the listeners, the producers, along with everything around it.
And I have a question on that as well. So going back to why you're here, I guess. So the SHIFT COMM conversation series, as we were saying while prepping for this talk, focuses on notion of curating. But then we were discussing this a little bit, and you mentioned that for your radio, you're not curating, and you're doing quite the opposite, right? And more specifically, you said, and I'm quoting, that everything you do makes sense only once it's done, which is something that you were referring to right now, because you're learning while practicing. So I wanted to ask you if you can tell us more about how you're thinking and structuring the contents of the radio, especially as it is a radio that focuses not only on music, but on sound, right, in a broader sense. So how does this non-curating work somehow, especially thinking about the fact that it is through sound and not simply through music tracks?
I think that, at least for me, I don't know for Yazan, but I'm not a curator. So asking the question, how is it, how do you feel doing non-curation for someone that is not a curator is like asking a non-smoker, how is it not smoking? So I don't know, but the radio, the radio is not curated in the sense, in the beginning it was a completely open platform in which anyone would be able to just drag and drop his own file and we would program everything. And now the volume of things we're receiving is, let's say, bigger. So we have another system in place with emails, etc. But the main idea is the same, is that it's an open public platform, and we try to broadcast everything we receive in the same way a public space is accessible by anyone.
Yeah. I think this idea of the open space has also developed by time, by learning, by the development of the relation with the audience and the producers and the size of the radio and how it's building up. So yes, it's not curating in the sense that we are not deciding what comes where and when, and how is this in relation to that. We are not trying to do that at all, but really keep a flow of sounds to go through the radio against what social media and against what all this digital media has created around us. So we are working not in void, but we are working against things that are around us all the time. So we are working and having in mind what social media does, and we are working and thinking what the music applications are doing, like Spotify, etc. And we are working, keeping in mind how the podcast and then Netflix culture has created in relation to listening experiences. So we are doing this, but we're not doing it alone. We are doing this with the community around us. So it's not like we are curators that are coming to tell the community how to behave, but rather working with the community and allowing the community also to produce their own spaces, voices. Actually, I would even think that this is becoming a place rather than a space. In the way it's being developing on its own and with a bigger community. You are muted.
Sorry, guys. That I was saying that this is somewhat where I was hoping to go next, like talking more a little bit about the community, because as you just said, the communities are at the heart of how you articulate the work of the radio. You just mentioned it. And also you say that you follow somewhat the flow of the community, right? And that the radio changes according to the community's needs. So I wanted to ask you if you can tell us more about, well, first, whether you have an idea of who your communities are, whether you have a sense somewhat of that. And also, how do you keep engaging with them, right? And how do you stay responsive to them? So you were mentioning emails, people kind of sharing elements for broadcasting. While we were prepping, you were also mentioning the chat. So for those who might not have visited Radio Alhara, they have no idea. So can you tell us a little bit about all these things that you've put in place, or how you're thinking through them to continue this engagement constantly over time?
Yeah, I think that the chat is a very important part of the radio. I mean, without the chat, the radio wouldn't be the same at all. And in a way, it's also a part of the radio where we meet with the people that are listening to the radio, but also with people that are producers on the radio. So the same people that are listening to the radio, that are on the chat, are also producers, and they also play some sets or do some shows on the radio, etc. So this blending in between producers and listeners is very characteristic of what the radio is. And then I think we have several, like we launched a week ago or 2 weeks ago, sort of an open call for, because the visual identity of the radio is something that is also very important for, that took a very big importance in the radio. And we launched an open call 2 weeks ago for visuals. We do visuals every day for the calendar of the program of every day. And we launched a call to have some visuals that include somehow an ellipse. So the logo of the radio is a sort of an ellipse, and the ellipse is it's a really nice logo, but it is very generic. I mean, it's just an ellipse, and with time it became associated with the Radio Alhara, and it could have been a circle or a triangle, but the ellipse is now Radio Alhara, and so so this open call was meant to have visuals that include an ellipse in any kind of form or shape, and these elements will be the visuals for the program of the day on our Instagram page. So I think that the visual identity and the chat are two components that nourish the radio with some community participation.
Yeah. To add to that, like also the visual identity is part of it. Is the daily, like everyone who has a show on the radio sends us a visuals, their visuals. So the visuals of the radio, which is on social media, is produced by the producers. So they choose their image, what they want to be presented, how they want to present themselves, and we just use it. So this also adds more kind of it confirms this, that it's not like we are deciding the visuals of the radio, but also the community. And this is something what the chat is doing, is that first of all, it's confirming this collectivity, that we are collectively listening, which is something that's going now against what, the podcast culture and the Netflix culture, which is, like you can listen, and the YouTube culture, you listen alone on your own time to anything. You're not bound by anyone or anything. You can stop it and watch it later. On the radio, the time is linear, so you have to listen now and here and together. So this is also what's creating this kind of the place, the radio as a place of collective interaction. And you see this a lot now, that many people are chatting and speaking, and there's a community that's getting to know each other and know of each other's existence at the moment of listening. So this is something that chat is allowing, and knowing who's there allows for it. So you're never listening alone.
Sorry, yes, and I just wanted to ask whether you want to show us the chat and like just some of the visuals. In the meantime, you guys are getting a lot of love from Facebook, people watching on Facebook. But no, I think it's interesting, like this notion of the chat and all this sort of visual aspects. So I just wanted to make sure that as we're chatting about this, and my next question is still again about community, we can have a look. So Yusuf, what we're looking at.
Yeah, so you can see here the radio's website. So if you go to yamakan.place, this is /Palestine, but .place, you can see here all the radios from Beirut, Tunis, Palestine, etc. And if you click on the Palestine one, you have Radio Alhara, and you just have a play button, and the chat is over here, and you can actually see who's connected. And yeah, you can just this is a text about the radio, but I don't know how it's very basic. And yeah, now is set by Jackson Allers from Beirut. He has a weekly show on Radio Alhara. It's called Sounds of Solidarity, and this is the show number 22. Jackson is part also of the Beirut Groove Collective. They've been very supportive towards the radio, and Jackson in particular has been nourishing the radio with weekly sets that are really, really nice. And our Instagram page, today we changed the logo. The logo was the same one, but with the letters R and A in English and in Arabic. But today we removed the letters. So it actually nourishes what we were saying before about the ellipse being associated with the radio without having anything else. This is the open call that we did for the visuals. Today we launched. Sorry.
We're still getting lots of visuals coming every day.
So people can share if they want. They can still contact you and send you their things. Their work.
Yeah, and we add one. Maybe you show you show one of these. Like this is on your one of the visuals sent to us.
For example, this one is a visual by Yahala Studio. So we have other. These images are from the Ballroom Blitz in Beirut. So we have this the Gold Room in the Ballroom Blitz is actually a place in Beirut where anyone that wants to play for the radio can go there and play live for the radio or record the set for the radio. Some visuals.
This one.
This one is a nice one. Yeah. This one. This is by Lena Kasasiye.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you more also about this relationship with the visual, with the visual part. But just staying for a moment more on this notion of community while you show us around, and I think it's. Again, it's very interesting to see how you're working, again, while withdrawing from this notion of curating. But with this notion of community, something that you mentioned before that I wanted to go back to is the notion of public space as well, which, as you were saying, and as I understood while we were prepping for the talk, also points toward ethical relationality, toward creating communities of exchange, but also of affection, solidarity, of proximity. So I wanted to ask you again how you're thinking about Radio Alhara as a public space, right? Or before you were saying as even a cultural center, somewhat.
Maybe it's more, I would say we are beginning to use this term, which is like, we call it communal media, okay? It's a question, I think, that has began coming to, like, since we are at home and with the lockdown and the quarantine, we immediately all went and totally moved to the digital life and digital existence. But then the question is, like, how are we entering these spaces? Like, these are, commercial spaces, also, corporate spaces, etc. So the radio is proposing, not alone, but like there's a whole community about it, a kind of communal media, a space online that's not judged by commercial or algorithmic kind of data mining algorithms, that eventually your whole existence on the radio is that you are buying or you are being sold to someone. No? The radio is trying to create, or it's creating a space for just being online without all of these kind of usages of your existence. It's communal in the sense that it's shaped and moved by the community, and you are there not only as a spectator or a consumer, but also as a producer, and as someone who is a producer of knowledge, producer of all sorts of information and even excitements and fun. Yani. So the radio, in that sense, is not trying to produce a content of community, but a structure for the community to use and to create, to confirm its existence through. And it's also not an easy platform. Meaning, yes, it's not visual, so it's not like you are doing videos and all these materials, but it's not like you write a sentence and voila, you are online. No, like you are producing something, you are producing sound, you are checking, you are deciding on what sound and what file and what kind of content you want to share. So it is that kind of platform that you come to it by really putting an effort and by really engaging with it and with the community around you, because you know who's listening and you can know and communicate with the listeners, and soon you will listen to their productions, etc. So
yeah, I think also that what Yazan was mentioning is, I mean, the radio is also a cultural center in the sense, maybe not in the sense of what cultural centers, not all of them, but a lot of them have become, like it's not a cultural center in the sort of institutionalized. Even the word is very complicated to say, but in that sense, I mean, the radio is a very fragile object, or a very fragile platform and because it's very fragile, it's not intimidating. And because it's not intimidating, it's open to all, and you're not very, I mean, up until now, we had some we had some very let's say famous people on the radio, and we had some guys that never did any kind of musical set or anything, that played on the radio with the same kind of there are no slots reserved for famous people and slots reserved. It's a sort of a platform that is fragile in the sense that it's not intimidating. And in that sense, I think that cultural centers are in a way a place in the society where you should be able to engage with others without being intimidated by the structure of the cultural center. And maybe the format, the audio format, helps doing this because there's no we don't see each other, so maybe it's less.
Yeah. In a time of visual representation, sound becomes a safer place to engage and more easy, softer than the visual. True, actually. Yeah.
And I love that you're going where I want to go next. I think it's perfect. Which is precisely this notion of the radio moving across disciplines. If we want to use this obsolete word, but let's just call them fields or however. You were saying before this, right? Outside the radio, you all work in some capacity with visually creative fields. And so far, also the radio has involved a lot of practitioners, right? From, let's say, the visual arts or however we want to call curators. I'm thinking about Reem, Shadid, Jack Persekin, artists, Raidi Yassin, the eFlux podcast. You were mentioning podcasts before, and also researchers involved in the arts. And I'm thinking about writer Karim Katan. So I wanted to ask you, on the one hand, what does multidisciplinarity mean to you in the context of the radio? But also how you think, and I love what you just said, so maybe we can just piggyback on that, but how you think also about visual arts and involving other senses, right? Sight, visuality in the radio, given that, as we said before, it's a radio based on sounds, not just music.
Maybe many of the people that came from visual culture did for the first time sound pieces, and did it really from the basics of using Zoom to record and GarageBand to edit a little bit, or even without editing and sending. At the beginning, especially, it was really full of these, and still lots of easy, simple recordings and this and experiments with how can we move from the visual to the sound. Till now we have this cinema radio project, which is we play a movie once a week on the radio, and it's you can it's we just rip the sound and we play the sound, and suddenly you notice that we have been taken away with the visual culture and the visual representations, and the sound.
There was this time where cinema radio was playing, and it was only audio, and someone wrote, "I love this scene."
Yes,
it's really funny.
Yeah, people sometimes know it by heart, the films, and true, some people do engage with it, in this audio on the audio level, that you listen to a film that you have been watching so many times, and you know which scene is this and what's happening, but still this intensity of the sound has allowed for a new experience the sound in a or the cinema or the visual culture in a new way. But also, I guess different people approach the sound from different point of views as well. So it's not like everyone is making music sets. Some people are also speaking. Some people are using other audio formats. Some people are reading. Some people are. So the radio has been an extension of many of the visual practices, and the sound has been transformed here in 2 or 3 times from audio, from visual to audio, from audio to visual again, etc. So I think in general the multidisciplinary stayed, although the medium has been the sound mainly, but it still functioned as a multidisciplinary medium in the way the content and the relation between content has evolved and connected.
Yeah, maybe some would argue that this multidisciplinarity would flatten the society, because creating this transversal sort of non-hierarchical society would flatten actually the society. But actually, what Yazan was mentioning is that the collectiveness of it, I mean, it is what enriches each and everyone in the community. I mean, now we made friends all over the world, and we I mean, the knowledge that we have. I mean, I'm talking personally, but the things I learned through listening to the radio.
Amazing.
I mean, yeah, it's in a very short amount of time, and I think this, at least for our practice as architects, has also an impact in the sense that maybe now we try even more to collectively work on a project. I mean, maybe, you know, why I mean, why not being a worker at some time, and the worker being the designer, and not in a very ideal state of mind, but really concretely thinking of collectively working on a project is a very enriching experience, I think.
Thanks for this. And then I wanted to go to, well, there's an element that is recurring in this conversation series, especially because we tend not to invite institutionalized projects, going back to what you were saying before. We try to steer away from that. And therefore, this is something that comes back over and over again, but it's something that also came up in a conversation and then seems to matter very much also to you, which is this idea of sustainability, where we're talking about this. So I wanted to ask you how you conceive of this in the context of the radio. Like, what role does it play? How are you working through it? How you are also ensuring the sustainability of the radio project?
Okay, so I think in general, like there, one has been involved in many of these kind of collective projects, where the question of, like how to find other resources other than money in making things work, how to be involved with time, with effort, with knowledge, with care, and with money sometimes. No? And I think the radio, in its collective practice, has managed to bring in all these kind of structures, maybe this kind of ways to contribute and to work on the radio and make it survive without depending a lot on having budgets. So the actual budget for the radio till now, in this last 8 months now, is what, around $800 maybe. That's the money value. For a project like this is like really very little, even less, I think, than 800. But the time and the effort and the knowledge that has been put in the radio is massive. But then, if you are doing it with such involvement, you also get paid with such involvement. So you get paid by, like not paid, but like compensated by, like how the community is enjoying and also supporting, and how we as a collective became closer and became, like working together and caring about each other, and how the community cares and involves and contributes, and like the amount of of material that has been played on the radio by the community without having money as an exchange value for all of that is incredible. And that could only happen because the radio has no money factor playing in it, like no money coming in and no money coming out. So the whole community is contributing with time, effort, knowledge, etc., their interest, their history, to a platform that represents them all. And this is what I think sustainability is for a cultural initiative and a cultural institution, is that it's really fed and taken care of by the community and by its, the people who are daily also working on it. Yeah, Yusuf.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to what he hasn't said.
Because Yusuf does, like, I have to say, Yusuf really managed to make the radio work efficiently. And without Yusuf, he's very technical in that sense, and of course, adding on many levels the music and his voice on the radio. So that was, that was really important. That yes, there is a founder team that is trying to keep the radio always making sure that everything is on time, or that at least around the time, or that the visuals are out, the programs are set, that everyone is well taken care of, at least from the people who are sending to us. Saeed, for instance, opens all the emails and checks all the emails and reply, etc. But it's not only about us, of course. It's a bigger community that is making this radio going, and that is, they are putting their time, effort, experience, etc. And this is the sustainability, I think, in general. Yeah.
So go ahead, Yusuf.
No.
You sure?
No, I was just gonna say that maybe the sustainability of the radio will be something that we would talk about more precisely once the radio will be dead.
That's fair enough. We've had in the past conversations also this sort of, we have tackled this notion of what is the lifespan of a project, which I think is something very interesting as well. So then we're about to run out of time. I have a couple of questions more, but whoever's watching and has questions, there we go. We have a question that just came in. I'm going to read it in a moment. Prior to getting there, I wanted to ask you briefly about, let's say, geography, okay? And ask you about the locales in which the five of you started or have been. When we read about the radio, we read about Bethlehem, Ramallah, Amman, and also how the radio somewhat reflects, you being rooted in certain contexts. Palestine, you mentioned Yusuf before, right? Which I guess it's something that we would love to talk or hear you talk about if you want. But so on the one hand, there's this notion, and then on the other hand, I would say that the radio expands way past that, right? Which is what we were saying at the beginning. And by speaking not only to, but also of other locations, other languages, other social, cultural, even political, I guess, context. So I wanted to ask you how this is happening, or what's happening, like being rooted, but also being able to branch out. You have programs that connect to musical scenes elsewhere, even outside, of course, of say Europe, Middle East, Asia, whatever. So how you're working this fine line and how you're staying sort of engaged with this multiple locales and multiple language context.
Maybe a good way to answer this question is to talk about this sort of event, let's call it an event, or this sort of
lineup.
protest. Yeah, this protest or this lineup we did on the radio called Fil Mishmish. And it was first a sort of a reaction to the annexation plan, the Israeli annexation plan on Palestinian lands. But then so the idea was to put together a lineup of different people, like DJs, artists, any disciplines, to come up together and participate in a sort of a huge protest on the radio that lasted for more than 80 hours, nonstop, and protesting this annexation plan. But at the end, this sort of protest wasn't only about the annexation plan, but was about any kind of annexation, aggression, discrimination, injustices, etc. So I think that when this happens, it becomes much more interesting in the sense that it brings together people that don't know each other, that are living way apart from each other, and that share enormously. And I think this is very important when it comes to Palestine, because people usually think of this conflict as a very complicated conflict. Or, when you talk to someone here, he will say, yeah, I don't know about it, it's very complicated. But actually it's not. It's as complicated as any other injustice that exists in any other part of the world. And going beyond, it's very important to be anchored somewhere and anchored to your environment, but also knowing that somewhere else globally there are some similarities. It brings this discussion, I think, a level further up.
Yeah. And also, maybe this answers, I think, Mia Yoshida's question about the locality, which I think, yes, the radio comes from Palestine and Jordan, and it's Arabic, but it's not bound to one language. It goes really beyond this, the issue of language. So any language, as actually it's in the text that we have on the radio itself, like any language is accepted. And that kind of like works more towards its being part of this word. It's not just to answer, like it uses the online to its extreme. So you have listeners sometimes from Australia and listeners from Brazil, and the Brazilians are playing Brazilian music, and then we have someone from Japan playing Japanese music. This interaction that is happening on the radio, this kind of internationalism that's happening, which we lose a lot on social media, because social media is made for you. It connects you with your community, or what the algorithm thinks you should connect to. Whereas on the radio, you connect with anyone who's listening. There's no filtering and there's no management of this kind of connectivity. And especially that it's a Palestinian, like it's a Palestinian coming from Palestine, this, isolated place in the world that's, that we barely can move between places, and no one can come to our place, etc. Then to do something that totally inverts the map and becomes, totally an inverted map, when the whole world is connected to Palestine. I think that was a real moment of kind of resisting the act of disappearing, or the act of of being smashed under the heavy hand of them of occupation. So and actually, I wish I can show you. Maybe now I can share something in the screen, which is this. Oh no, I cannot share. I need to open. Can you maybe, Yusuf, share the radio jar map?
Yeah.
It actually. Oh, maybe I can share here. Wait. No.
Can you?
No. I don't. I can't. I need to do something. like the radio jar map. If it's open.
Just a second. I think what Yazan is also saying is that sometimes you connect the radio to listen to a particular program because you know the producer, and you end up listening to something else and something that is completely different from what you first came to
listen to.
Yeah.
Actually, we were listening to something on the radio called Ways of Hearing, and they were speaking about how Spotify, for instance, like you put a song on Spotify and then it keeps giving you this, the same genre, the same type of music. So you are always in your comfort zone. So here are the people listening right now, like people from
live.
So
like someone from Japan,
we have
America,
Turkey, Portugal,
Colombia,
Spain, UK, US,
Lebanon,
Canada, Colombia.
So, like, you never think of of such a big map as your community. Now you are seeing the back end of the radio. Which is nice, like like you are seeing all of these. This is here all the listeners.
Yeah, so we still have some countries.
But actually, if you put from the beginning of the radio, the map, the map will be totally full. Yeah.
Which is a great sign of you being able to branch out like to different contexts. I'm gonna zoom in again once you have it so that we can see it better.
You can. Then you need to put on costume, and then you put the beginning of 20th of March, Yusuf. The first day. Intalaqa. Yeah.
So then while Yusuf does that, I'm just going to show you some of the love that I was mentioning before from Rolando, who I think is part of your community.
Oh, yes. He's a big listener. Yeah.
From Ering, to whom we sent a huge hug.
He has a bi-weekly show every Tuesday. Every other Tuesday at 3:30 p.m. Super
you know
nice
it by heart.
Yeah. He's well informed.
Yeah, this is the map of the world. We have a huge listeners from the US. It's amazing.
And maybe it's also important to mention that Israel is on the third rank, but actually Israel on this platform, I don't know which frontiers they considered, but
they don't distinguish.
But, I don't know because there are also all the cities like Haifa, Jaffa, all the north, which are Palestinian cities, so they're included in the
I think it's fair and good to specify. Thanks for mentioning that. So then I wanted to, again, if anybody watching has more questions, please, now is the time, because we have 6 minutes to go, more or less. But I have my final question somewhat, which I guess is twofold. On the one hand, I just want to ask you whether there's anything that we haven't addressed that you would like to share or comment on, and if so, just go ahead. But also, I wanted to wrap up by asking you, now, since we've spoken about sound and music, and both are somewhat forms of thinking. So I want to ask you, what is in your thoughts in this moment, in this history, moment in time, and therefore what you've been listening to these days?
I've been listening to lots of Zoom meetings. It's really been my like I tuned in today. I tuned in this morning to Kitmir Gildi. Yeah, the nice thing is that whenever one of us is traveling, well, we're not traveling much, but now I'm in Amsterdam. So immediately there you create a new community for the radio. Like you invite people, like, hey, do you want to play something? Do you want to get engaged? And really people tend to respond. And I was surprised that Radio Alhara is known. I thought like it's like, yeah, like you tell them about Radio Alhara and people know it and want to, and find it nice that they can easily engage with. So like, for instance, we do this jamming now once a month with the Togar here at the Rijks and many of the residents. And it's so nice that we connect all the equipment and we just begin playing after midnight. And it lasts for 5-6 hours sometimes of jamming, playing music live on the radio. And it's amazing that you feel like, yes, you are playing here in one room, but then you have people listening from all around the world. And this is something that I guess you also get to know, that if you are playing at night, you have a community listening in the US, and if you are playing in the daytime, you have a community listening in Japan or in Australia. Like it's a 24-hour community, and that's super special and super nice that you are connecting on the level, not on the how money is moving, but on the level of culture, that there's a cultural practice going on these 24/7.
Today we had a super nice show by Rolando Hernandez. His show is called Dos Sures, and today was the 6th episode, and it was called Flamenco Impuro. It was really nice. And we had a live by Orok just before our talk. It was amazing too. Last week we had this launch of the Gold Room at the Ballroom Blitz in Beirut, and this was really amazing. We had, I really liked a set by Lilian Schlela. It was really, it was a sort of a set that was not really, it was like composed of different sounds that were one after the other without being the tracks. It was a sort of a composition, and it was really, it was at the same time very powerful and very soft. It was really amazing set. Yeah.
That's great. So then I'm just going to hear you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Yazan.
Yeah, just like Ilham Khattab, maybe asking something. If we do lots of collaborations with, and we welcome collaborations. It's actually, we began as a collaboration and we want to continue as such. So yes, if Ilham, she can write us on radio.alhara@gmail.com. You can also find the email on our website. So
that's great. And then some more love as we're wrapping up from Radio Encontrado. And then for the first time in the history of SHIFT COMM, someone with my same name who says hi from Milan.
Hello, Ilaria.
So, guys, thank you so much. This was great. I hope that the skeptics that were wondering what does this have to do with curating got a lot of tips for how we should think about community building, content not driven by money, but by people, solidarity, thinking in communal terms, and so on and so forth. So I thank you both for giving us your time and sharing with us your knowledge. I encourage, of course, everyone to tune in and listen, at least for a few hours during the day, to Radio Alhara. And I want to thank also everyone who's been watching this, and remind everybody that SHIFT COMM will be back on Tuesday, December 15th at 6 p.m. Berlin time, as always. And that will be our last conversation of 2020. So we will announce the speaker in the coming days. As always, I just shared the website in case people want to sign up to stay up to date and know who will be our next guest, and sharing again our email address in case you have questions for Youssef and Yazan were happy to also work as a connector and pass it on. So I'm just gonna wrap up with this, and thank you again so very much to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for
Thank you.
organizing this.
Take care.
Yes.